The idea of a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor originated in the head of the commander-in-chief of the Japanese fleet, Admiral Yamamoto. At the beginning of September 1941, at a secret meeting with the Japanese emperor, it was decided to start a war against the United States. Preparations for this treacherous strike, which was to be carried out before the declaration of war, were carried out in complete secrecy, and by November 22, a strike force consisting of 6 aircraft carriers with battleships and cruisers supporting them was concentrated at a rarely visited anchorage off the Kuril Islands, north of Japan. The date of the attack had already been set for Sunday, December 7, and on November 26, Eastern Hemisphere time, the squadron under the command of Admiral Nagumo set sail. At the time when Nomura was negotiating, the task force of the Japanese fleet under the command of Admiral Nagumo, numbering 23 ships, was heading to the Hawaiian Islands, the powerful U.S. naval base Pearl Harbor. Keeping far to the north of the Hawaiian Islands, amid the fogs and storms of the northern latitudes, Nagumo approached the target unnoticed. Let's go back to the movie. One of the friends starts dating a nurse, they love each other, but then he finds himself forced to leave the US for the UK to participate in hostilities. By a tragic accident, left alone, the girl is carried away by his friend. Returning back from a combat mission, her fiancé finds out about the betrayal. But he finds the strength to forgive both her and his friend. He is noble and generous. Then he finds out that his beloved is pregnant. The tension of the plot is growing. The events take place against a backdrop of beautiful tropical nature. The movie camera shows the azure sea and the inviting cloudless sky. Beautiful girls and boys sunbathe on golden beaches. The boys are young pilots and sailors, the girls are medical nurses working in a hospital on the island. Peaceful life, love, everything is so beautiful and romantic. But the real culmination was the scenes of the Japanese air raid. A scene is shown in which peacefully sleeping people are awakened by the roar of aircraft engines and the sounds of explosions. Frightened people jumped up from their bunks and ran out into the street, where they saw terrifying scenes of exploding ships. On ships, people also ran out onto the decks and died under heavy enemy fire. A young Negro sailor tried to save the mortally wounded captain. The fear and confusion of American sailors and pilots gradually gave way to a desire to defend themselves. People ran to arms, to their planes, but the fire of Japanese fighters drove them back. Nevertheless, the two heroes of the film still sat down in their faithful combat vehicles and began to take away enemy planes. They dragged them along and led them to the ambush site of the American military. As a result, several Japanese aircraft were destroyed. Two friends flew their planes towards each other, and the Japanese planes chasing them collided with each other and exploded. In reality, the events unfolded as follows. On December 7, Germany's ally Japan delivered a crushing blow to Pearl Harbor, the main U.S. naval base, disabling a significant part of the U.S. Navy and aviation. Now the United States was forced to engage in direct large-scale military operations against a fascist bloc. The attack was launched before sunrise from a position approximately 275 miles north of Pearl Harbor. On Sunday, December 7, 1941, at 7:55 a.m., Japanese bombers, rising from aircraft carriers, delivered a massive blow to the U.S. fleet, lined up, as if on parade, in Pearl Harbor. Earlier this morning, 92 American warships of all classes were in the harbor, more than half of the Pacific Fleet. As in the exercises, wave after wave were 360 Japanese aircraft. Among them were bombers of all types, accompanied by fighters. The first bomb fell at 7:55 a.m. By 8:25 a.m., the first waves of torpedo planes and dive bombers struck the intended blow. After all, in the end, the American military began to resist. The scenes in the hospital looked terrifying. The medical staff courageously tried to save numerous wounded. Dressings ran out very quickly, and ordinary ladies' stockings were used. A nurse who came out of the hospital saw a crowd of wounded soldiers storming the hospital. Many of the wounded were so crippled that the nurse had to write their names on their foreheads with lipstick. By 10 o'clock in the morning, the battle had already ended, leaving behind a broken fleet, shrouded in a veil of fire and smoke. The main targets were 8 battleships of the Pacific Fleet. Of the 8 battleships, 5 were sunk and 3 were seriously damaged. The Americans lost 19 warships. The battleship Arizona